SHINee's Married to the Music. This MV was released in summer 2015, but I think it should have been published during Halloween season for having all of the spooky and quirky vibes. The story is about SHINee getting involved in an eccentric party and slowly being swallowed by it. In this wedding ceremony, the bride is a mysterious woman dressed in black tulle, whose face isn't shown. Since the very beginning of the MV, it could already be seen that this isn't a normal party. Opening the story is a phrase stamped on a roadblock: "Marriage is a slow death." The next transition, where the screen goes from black to white, can be interpreted as the time SHINee is crossing the barrier between mundane life and some fantasy realm. The cans tied to the back of the car are a reference to a wedding tradition. However, the neon colors, a very uncomfortable color to look at, signal something unusual. Just like the bride's black dress, this tradition breakthrough was an indication of very abnormal things. Though the room was at first empty, after each SHINee member took a glowing drink, it was suddenly filled with partygoers. The boys were initially surprised, but then quickly managed to adapt. All the members were then so absorbed in the wedding party that they agreed to get into some deadly games. The members first gathered around the kitchen table to spin the bottle, and when the bottle pointed at Key, he was pinned on the wheel of death. Then the bride threw a knife and cut off his head. Losing Key, the members gradually came to sense what was happening. Then it was Onu's turn to be chosen by the spinning bottle. This time, he was told to beat others with a baseball bat. Taemin was hit in the head, leading to both his eyeballs popping out and landing on the ground. Whereas Onu then laughed like it was funny, Taemin groveled on the floor like Velma looking for her glasses. As karma came back around, Onu was the next member to lose part of his body. After vibing mindlessly to the party, he came to the bathroom, washed his face, and got his nose chopped off by the deadly water. Then came Junghyun's turn. After taking a glowing cookie from the bride, he immediately puked up confetti, which other people kept playing with. Kinda gross though. After that, the bride approached Junghyun with a kiss and took away his lips. The last person on the death note was Minho. To save the best for last, the bride tricked all the other members of SHINee to blow the wedding cake candles with her. But they didn't know these candles were spelled, and were gonna burn off Minho's face once they blow them. As a result, they were all the murderers of Minho's downfall. The story came to an end with the bride sitting alone in her bedroom, with poor lighting, cutting out SHINee's pictures in a shady way. Then we see SHINee members and their body parts lying all over her room. Combining all the above clues, we can come to a conclusion that this creepy bride is going to make her own ideal groom after using different SHINee's body parts that she collected during the party. Jesus, she sounds more like an evil witch than a bride. The ideal groom turned out to be pretty handsome. He kinda has Key's head, Taemin's eyeballs, Onu's nose, Junghyun's mouth, and Minho's body. Sunny Hill's Prey. In a K-pop industry mostly fueled by sugary melodies and sweet visuals, the MV Prey of Sunny Hill is a very, very different take when telling the haunted story of a physically deformed man. Opening the MV, we see a mysterious man covered in cloth, being held captive in a semi-underground dungeon. Then a woman comes, takes the man with her to a laboratory, where a doctor performs some kind of experiment on him. The somber, cold shade of blue in the lab amplifies the sinister. This is where the man takes off his mask, revealing a heavily deformed face with several rough bumps. The next series of scenes portray numerous experiments done on him. Each is more misgiving and weariness than the one before. After that, he is locked into a room with a cross hanging on the wall to pray. As the speaker in the song, presumably the deformed man, openly wailed, "Someone told me to pray, to dream. They say that anything can come true." He was told to pray and to believe in the religion, in return for the promise that he will be set free. However, at the end of the MV, the fate of the deformed man is still doomed. His ear was cut off and put into a glass jar, along with many deformed body parts of other abnormal people like him. Through this MV, the author not only expressed the dark message about how some abnormal individuals are at higher risks of discriminatory or even dehumanizing treatments, but also raised a doubt about the fulfillment of prayer. Because in the end, the man did hold on to a light hope and managed to break free, but he was still taken aback and put down. The praying he sent out had never truly set him free. Vix, Voodoo Doll. If you have watched the MV, it might take a lot of energy to draw the whole thing out, because on the first watch, the story and the lyrics seem totally contrasting. The lyrics are about how Vic's boys were willing to be the victim of the girl's voodoo doll, that she could take her anger out on. It seemed that the boys didn't want to escape anytime soon, but in contrast with the lyrics, the MV scenes showed all the members trying to escape. In a broader sense, it's about a somewhat toxic relationship, where the person is willing to take the pain of someone else onto them, regardless of the damage this does to their own personal well-being. Though many artists had addressed the topic of abusive relationships through their works before, Vix creatively used a voodoo doll to tell the story through 4 features of an abusive relationship: intimidation, isolation, coercion, and minimalization. There are many horror scenes where the members have to endure pain. Pieces of glass stuck to his arms, Hyuk, Leo, Ken, and In all having piercings all over their body, and being bound to the ceiling, and Ravi is physically restrained with ropes. The creepy vibe of this song mainly focused on this feature because throughout the MV, all the bloody scenes rotated around how the girl tortured the voodoo doll, thus indirectly hurting Vix members. Opening the MV was the scene of a girl cutting open the members and carelessly stitching them while they were bleeding. Throughout the MV, the girl repeatedly stabbed the voodoo doll that controlled all of the boys. Here, when putting the choreography into perspective, it could also be understood that even when the girl didn't hurt them, the boys would still be willing to hurt each other to please her. The second feature, isolation, would need a little bit of consideration to figure out. In the MV, the fact that each member was trapped in a separate cell, whereas the girl was outside, freely walking around, signaled that in a toxic relationship, no connection was made in the name of lovers. Instead, the bond between the two was just master and servant. The third factor, coercion, was a little hard to pin down since there was no dialogue. Yet it can still be interpreted through some scenes where the girl approached each member and tempted them. Seemingly just by her presence, she managed to drive them all mad, and ready to ride or die for her. The last factor, minimization, was super hard to see just by merely reading the lyrics. Yet when you look closely at how different members were dehumanized into entertainment entities by the girls, you would easily see how Vix portrayed this feature. The girl objectified them physically with promiscuous outfits, and treated them like toys. When she stabbed the doll, she laughed satisfyingly at them, as they're in clear, visible pain. They were less than puppets to her, and they were just surrogates for whatever emotions she wanted them to feel. Ending the MV was the scene where all the members managed to escape, except for Hongbin. Though there was some ambiguity, it can probably be interpreted that as Hongbin had escaped, got his soul back, which explained why his eyes were normal for some seconds, but then was dragged back to the girl. He was again possessed. Because the other members had all escaped, Hongbin was now the only person to be tortured through the voodoo doll. Irene and Seulgi, Monster. Different from the previous songs mentioned in the list, the creepiness of Monster wasn't visually shown. Only when you connect the lyrics to the scenes can you see how scary the MV was. Though SM hasn't publicly stated their inspiration for the song, many people believe that it was based on the novel Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, the benchmark of every vampire story on Earth. If you have read the novel, you would immediately realize that there were lots of references from the book. For those who haven't known, the story was about a young woman named Laura, who was preyed upon by a female vampire named Carmilla, later revealed to be Mircalla. The character is a prototypical example of the vampire, expressing romantic desires toward the protagonist. The reason why Monster wasn't just about queerbaiting is that the two characters were ideally supposed to seduce each other. Opening the MV was the scene of Seulgi being the monster and crawling toward Irene to take over her body. According to Carmilla, the cat-like makeup of Seulgi also matched with the figure of the monster because it was described to have many forms, one of which was in the cat-like shape. Similar to the story where Carmilla controlled Laura, in the opening choreography, it can be seen that Seulgi was also manipulating Irene. The dance moves in the pre-chorus further portrayed the way Laura was controlled. This, combined with the lyrics of "Under one light, why are there two shadows?" indicates how they were becoming one. This interrogation was again seen in the mirror dance in the chorus. Though in the first verse, Seulgi took charge of seducing Irene, in the second verse, things completely turned upside down. While the lyrics remain the same, the cinematography has a few changes, With Irene turning into the monster, it was indicated that Seulgi had succeeded in assimilating Irene, and now both of them were monsters. As the final chorus approached, it can be seen that Irene was now the one to control Seulgi. In the story, there was also a similar detail implying that Carmilla was kissed by Laura. Though the MV didn't portray the end of the story, Carmilla's head was actually chopped off and burned down to ashes. Gain. F you. Though Gain has always been famous for her sexy image, in the FU comeback, she suddenly strayed away from the familiar figure. Basically, FU reveals a relationship that has taken a dark turn, where it grew emotionally and physically abusive. The man in the MV spent most of the time brutalizing Gain, attempting to force her to sleep with him or intimidating her with brute force and violence. Beginning of the MV was the scene where Gain was forced to sleep with her boyfriend. Since Gain wasn't strong enough to fight back, all that she could do was suffer in silence. After that, Gain got into the chain of days where she was sexually abusive. As the MV proceeded halfway, there was a scene where Gain seemed to have fainted in her boyfriend's hands. Though there was some ambiguity, this scene can be understood as when Gain tried to stand up for herself, and she was intimidated and beaten up. Since the man really wanted to have Gain, he held her beside to compensate for his violence. After that incident, they seemed to make up, because the MV transited to the scene where they were both happily conversing. Yet, after realizing that Gain hasn't put her trust completely in him, the boyfriend got mad and tore both Gain and their relationship apart. This interpretation can be deduced from the horrifying scene, where blood was all over the bathroom. The peak of this whole thing was when he poured gasoline all over their bodies, and forced Gain to die with him. Luckily, Gain seemed to have escaped that toxic relationship, because at the end of the video, all that was left was her boyfriend crying all by himself, and Gain was in another place. So, which MV do you find the most eerie? And why? Are there any other creepy MVs that you want to add to the list? Don't hesitate to leave your thoughts down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to BeBoss TV for more interesting K-pop content. Thank you for watching.